Motors Baylor Bear Hotline segment. Of course, Richard Carr Motors on the loop in Waco, sponsor of all the Baylor segments we have on 365 Sports, and joined by Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com recruiting analyst and coordinator. All right, Grayson, where is everything? What's on the radar right now when it comes to what coaches are looking at, who they're looking at, what can be done or what can't be done?
Right. So, I mean, I guess in the last a little over a week, I suppose, since we talked, they added another commit in Brock Jackson out of Lumberton. So he gives them their first defensive commit in this 2024 class. They're now up to 3 commits. And, you know, they're kind of at a point right now where they added Colton Staracki, the big offensive lineman, off of the junior day visit, added Brock Jackson off the junior day visit, and then, of course, Lorena wide receiver Jaden Porter has been committed for a long time. He's kind of been the staple of the class in this early stage. But now I think they've kind of covered both sides initially to start the class. And I know all 3 of these guys have been priority prospects for the Baylor staff ever since they offered, which in most cases was a long time ago. And so to get these 3 in the class, I think is really important. And I know talking to Brock Jackson this week, you know, a big thing he talked about was being, you know, that leader on the defensive side of the ball as far as this recruiting class goes. And I felt like at times in last year's class, you know, they didn't necessarily have a ton of guys who stepped up into that role. I think as things progressed, they really kind of stepped up more in those roles as far as recruiting other recruits. But it was really interesting to hear that from Brock Jackson, who has some pretty good relationships with defensive players in this class. So I think they're at a good point right there in the 2024 class. And then as far as kind of what's next, I mean, the staff continue to put out offers. They put out one today to Ashton Bethel Roman, a wide receiver out of Ridge Point. Ridge Point should sound familiar to Baylor fans because DK Kalu, who signed with Baylor in the 2023 class, played there. And then, of course, a target that they're really recruiting hard, Mason Dossett, who's actually a Baylor legacy, also plays at Ridge Point. So lots of connections there with that Ridge Point program. And so that's something to definitely keep an eye on. And then, of course, outside of that, it's just, you know, more offers going out, more evaluations going out, and just trying to figure out, you know, how are they going to maximize the amount of spots they currently have in this class, which right now is kind of looking like 15 or 16. Now I'm expecting that to grow as time progresses, but right now that's kind of what they're working with. So they got to maximize those spots and make sure they're not wasting it.
Grayson, is especially the small class, have you noticed any type of a pattern starting to develop just in terms of kind of how they're spraying those offers out? I mean, is there a particular side of the ball or particular position groups that they're hitting heavier than others, or has it been pretty spread out and pretty even?
So I would say that I think recently it's been a little bit more spread out, but there are a couple positions where I feel like they've kind of put out the offers that they want out and may not add a ton more offers as time progresses. So kind of what I mean by that is they already have a commit on the offensive line in Colton Staracki, and they really sent out a ton of these offers early and haven't sent out a bunch as we've kind of progressed. And so that kind of tells me that they're really working on the guys that they've already offered. And I think that's pretty apparent when you look at, you know, guys like Lendale offensive lineman Casey Poe. He's been named to keep an eye on. San Marcos offensive lineman Ori Williams. A kid out of Utah, Isaiah Garcia. I talked to him yesterday. He's looking at potentially visiting. He would be another one that I'd put on that radar. And then, of course, Pleasant Grove offensive lineman Caleb Hackelman and Copperas Cove offensive lineman Michael Uni. That's kind of the group that I continue to look at. There's probably a few others, but in general, that position seems like one where, hey, we've sent out as many offers as we kind of need right now. Now let's go work on these relationships and see which ones we can land. And then on the other hand, you know, I think we're seeing more defensive line offers from the staff. That's been apparent. And then, of course, the secondary is a big one. They've really been sending out a lot of offers to safeties especially, and then cornerbacks to an extent as well. So I think those two positions in particular are ones where I think that there's more offers to come, or at least that's where things are trending at the moment.
Okay, you can't answer quarterback for this question, no matter how badly you want to. What position group are you most intrigued by in spring?
Quarterback.
Quarterback, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm actually, obviously, I think the easy answer is quarterback, but I would say I'm very intrigued by the safety position. And a big reason why is because I think as of this moment, I'm not sure how much they're going to get out of Devin Lemire this spring, because obviously he's coming off the shoulder injury he had at the end of last year, which really hampered him in that Air Force game. And so I'm not sure really if he's going to do much this spring at all. And so for that reason, you're going to see a lot of these young guys, whether it's Corey Gordon or Devin Bobby or Alfonso Allen, get a lot of those reps and get a lot of opportunities to prove what they can do, whether that's at field safety, boundary, or star. I just feel like that's an area where they really need, to lock down more guys who can really play at this level and are experienced enough to play at this level. And I think this is a great time for those guys to develop into really good football players, especially while, one of the guys who everyone's projecting, or at least I'm projecting to be the only for sure starter in the secondary, might be out for a little while. So I think I'd go with safety, but there are a few other very intriguing ones for sure. That's just the one that I think immediately comes to my mind outside of quarterback.
So, Grayson, I know that we kind of talked about this a little bit. I don't know if it was ever made public officially or not, but Bryson Jackson coming back for another year, a 7th year. There's been this logjam because of COVID and the bonus years and all of that, but still kind of getting to the end of that. And maybe he wasn't as impactful last year as maybe expected, given he was a 6-year guy. But I saw that because he was on the spring game graphic that they put out. They had him there front and center. So was that officially announced? And I guess you can go ahead and assume that it is official now. And what are your thoughts on Bryson Jackson coming back for yet another year?
Right. So I think it might be, and I know it was different with TJ Franklin as we kind of got an announcement, but we didn't really get an announcement on Gabe Hall, and then didn't really get an announcement on Bryson Jackson, even though we've kind of mentioned that those seemed very likely to happen as time progressed as we're about to enter the spring. So yeah, so my thoughts on Bryson Jackson are, I think he was a little bit underutilized last year. And I think a big part of it, honestly, was the fact that Baylor kind of trailed in more games than I think was anticipated. Baylor didn't really force a ton of, 3rd and long situations. And my view on Bryson Jackson is that he's kind of ideal in those situations where you're up, you have a lead, you're forcing the other team to throw the football, or in situations where it's 3rd and long. That's where he becomes his best in my eyes, especially as a pass rusher and a guy who can drop into coverage and just really a versatile player. But those are the situations that I think he's best built for. And Baylor didn't have many of those last year. And so I think that really hampered his production. I think with Matthew Pallage coming in, I think they're going to use him a little bit more creatively because honestly, coming into the year, he was one of those guys that I really felt like could surprise people and potentially be the leading sacker on the entire team last year. And I think going into next year, I think there's a role and a possibility for him to increase his production, play a bigger role, and obviously continue to provide that leadership, which I think is the single biggest important reason for him to come back is that leadership and what he can bring to that locker room that desperately needs it, that's really young and needs more veteran leadership. Having a guy like him stay and potentially come back and really build on his leadership qualities, I think is really key for this football team, and I think it can become contagious, and it's something that Dave Aranda and the staff really need.
All right, so Matthew Pallage, Christian Campbell, A.J. Stewart, Tyler Hancock, the new part of the staff. Christian Robinson, Christian Campbell. Christian Robinson. How and what have you heard, at least early on? I know some of them got there right up against the deadline of signing day, whatever, but on the road, are you getting feedback on them from any of the prospects on what their styles might be or who is the one having an impact?
Right. So I think I'm going to speak more towards the guys who I've heard most about. I haven't gotten to hear much about Tyler Hancock as far as the special teams go. I know the current recruits that they got in, like Palmer Williams and Jack Stone, they weren't recruited by him. But I'm sure he's going to have a big impact on them. And I think he was a very nice hire for the staff just to really focus on that special teams area. Now, as far as the other guys go, A.J. Stewart doing a great job as far as, in my eyes, identifying elite talent and really, going out and building those relationships and really just staying connected with the guys that he was recruiting at Oregon State. We've seen that a little bit. I also have heard just good things as far as his relationship building characteristics with these recruits. You know, they have a good relationship with him. And a lot of times you don't always hear that. And I think with AJ, it's great to hear that, you know, he does build good relationships with some of the recruits. And I think it's really rubbing off well on the current running backs and, of course, the running backs they're recruiting. Now, as far as the other two go, Christian Robinson, I think, is going to be a dynamic recruiter. I think he was brought in to be a dynamic recruiter, and he's a guy who everyone I've talked to, he's a guy that they really like. And speaking on that, they're, in my eyes, the best will linebacker prospect in the state, Anthony Smith, out of Jasper. He's been a guy that's been recruited by Baylor for a really long time, and he was recruited by Ron Roberts. And he mentioned that Christian Robinson was recruiting him at Auburn, and that his relationship the moment Christian Robinson got to Baylor was better than his relationship with Ron Roberts, and that they were really tight because of their, you know, brief connection at Auburn. And then, of course, him coming to Baylor, they've been able to build on that really quickly. So, again, I think another big, you know, potential upgrade there on the recruiting front. And then Matthew Pallage, I think for him, you know, he's recruiting really well, and I think you're going to see big improvements there at the safety position and just how they're viewing that position and the defense as a whole. I think his initial focus coming in was probably more about scheme and trying to figure out, you know, what guys are going to play what position on the current roster. He has recruited quite a bit, and I've heard his name some, but I don't think I've heard it to the level that we're going to hear it because a lot of these recruits really like him. But I think it's a situation where he's having to, you know, kind of do a bunch of things all at once. So I think as time progresses, we'll probably hear his name even more on the recruiting trail because of the guys he has talked to. I've heard rave reviews from all of them about him recruiting them at Oregon or him having a great personality or them building a great relationship. So far, I would say A+ on the recruiting trail. All these guys are doing a great job, and they're already building connections so early into their time at Baylor.
I do remember when T.J. Franklin had the graphic or whatever. And then I remember one time making a comment about Bryson Jackson. Craig, I think you said he hasn't made that decision yet. But if he's on the front page of their graphic for the spring game, then obviously.
No, I didn't say he didn't make a decision. I just said they haven't made his decision official.
Yeah.
So if
or
he
Gabe
made
Hall,
it, yeah.
But there's no other options now unless you worry about the transfer portal, and that can't happen until after basically spring drills on May 1st. And so that's good news that they got some of those guys coming back who have been around quite a bit. Grayson, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com. Recruiting coordinator and analyst. He puts up it's